Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unravel a massive, hidden force that's driving up the cost of, well, almost everything you buy. It's a phenomenon that probably feels completely disconnected from your day-to-day life. But trust me, it's acting like a massive, invisible tax on your groceries.
I mean, we've all felt that universal sting at the checkout counter lately, right? You're buying the exact same basics you always do, but the total is just jarring. And it's not even just the final bill. You open a package of your favorite snack, and it suddenly looks like a miniature version of what it used to be. The products are shrinking, the prices are skyrocketing, so what is actually going on here?
If you ask around, the assumptions are pretty standard. We tend to blame corporate greed, or we point the finger at government spending and just broad general economic inflation. But what if I told you the real culprit is actually thousands of miles away from your local grocery store? The actual underlying engine of these price hikes isn't sitting in a corporate boardroom. It's a wildly overheated, massively disruptive patch of the Pacific Ocean.
Part 1. The Hidden Grocery Tax. During the recent El Niño, global agriculture experienced some absolutely unprecedented devastation. And this is perfectly illustrated by something we all love: chocolate. Consider this number: $12,200. That was the peak price for just 1 metric ton of cocoa futures during the last El Niño. That is a staggering 150% surge. To put that into perspective, that's like the price of silver multiplying 5-fold in a single year. Now sure, cocoa prices eventually fell from that crazy peak, but the price of your chocolate bar? Yeah, that didn't. Instead, manufacturers had to adapt. They hit us with shrinkflation, literally reducing a standard Mars bar from 51 grams down to 40 grams for the exact same price. Others turned to skimflation, swapping out the expensive cocoa butter for cheaper substitutes like palm oil or shea butter. You are quite literally getting less and paying more, all because of the Pacific Ocean.
Part 2. Choking the global supply.
Now, the problem doesn't just stop at the farms. The physical infrastructure we rely on to actually move those goods around the planet, it's literally drying up. Keep this number in mind: 76. That is the number of Olympic-sized swimming pools of fresh water required for just one single ship to pass through the locks of the Panama Canal. And the Panama Canal is the single most critical choke point for U.S. agricultural trade. It handles roughly 40% of all U.S. container traffic. But during the recent El Niño, Gatun Lake, which is the critical body of water that feeds those locks, suffered a catastrophic climate-induced drought. And this brilliantly illustrates the fallout. Normally, the canal handles around 38 daily transits. But because of the lack of water, authorities had to slash that down to a maximum of just 22. Now, that seemingly small restriction, it created a massive bottleneck, resulting in a queue of over 160 stranded ships. Desperate ship owners were literally bidding up to $4 million just to secure a transit slot. That is more than 20 times the normal rate. Others just gave up and had to reroute entirely around South America or Africa. And those millions of dollars in extra shipping costs, well, they don't just disappear into thin air. They land right in your pocket at the grocery checkout.
Part 3. Starving grids and pantries.
See, what happens in one isolated part of the globe has a profound ripple effect everywhere else. When developing nations are pushed to the brink by these weather systems, it directly threatens global markets and our collective climate goals. Take Zambia, for instance. This is a nation that relies on hydroelectricity for 85% of its power, largely from the Kariba Dam. But that exact same El Niño drought that dried up the Panama Canal, it struck Zambia with equal ferocity. The dam's live water storage dropped to near record lows, and hydroelectric output plummeted by an astonishing 90%. The result? The entire nation was plunged into darkness, enduring crippling 21-hour daily power blackouts.
And this creates a devastating, tragic irony. Zambia was actually making huge strides in the green transition, signing multi-billion-dollar solar deals to power millions of homes. But listen, when your grid collapses and your economy grinds to an absolute halt, survival takes over. To keep the lights on and the copper mines running, the government had to pivot completely, partnering with a Chinese firm to rapidly develop a 600-megawatt coal-fired plant. Short-term survival was traded for long-term climate damage, which really shows how the transition to green energy can be entirely sabotaged by the very climate change it's meant to fight.
And the desperation doesn't just impact energy, it completely destabilizes global food security. Look at India. They are the world's largest rice exporter, responsible for 40% of global exports. But when El Niño threatened their domestic, water-intensive crops, India hit the panic button and banned non-basmati rice exports entirely. When we look at the fallout, their non-basmati exports plummeted by 88%. This instantly drove the benchmark price of Thai rice up by 22%, hitting a 15-year high. That sudden scarcity caused an estimated $353 million in welfare losses in sub-Saharan Africa alone. It is a massive global domino effect.
Part 4. The Broken Rain Machine. So, the crucial point is, we've seen the micro impacts on things like chocolate, the logistical nightmares in Panama, and the systemic shocks in Zambia and India. But what is actually causing all of this? Basically, we're witnessing the breakdown of what meteorologists call the Walker circulation. To really understand this, we need to grasp teleconnections, which, simply put, are atmospheric bridges. A warming event in one patch of the tropical Pacific doesn't just stay put, it actively hunts down the rest of the globe. A drought in Asia and a massive flood in South America are intricately linked by these sprawling pressure patterns.
Let's break down the mechanics here and see how this builds into what's known as the jet stream warp. Step 1. Warm sea surface temperatures shift over to the central or eastern Pacific. Step 2. This intense heat forces air rapidly upward, spreading out high in the atmosphere. And then Step 3. This generates a Rossby wave source. Think of this source as a starting gun. It launches a massive, stationary wave train that travels right along the jet stream. This is exactly why you'll suddenly see completely unseasonal, nasty storms dumping rain in California, while the Midwest experiences unusually dry, totally snowless winters. The entire global weather map just gets rewritten.
Part 5. The uninsurable new normal. We're no longer just dealing with a cycle that comes and goes. We might actually be entering a permanent El Niño state. Believe it or not, today's cool years are already warmer than the famously hot years of the 1980s. Just let this horrifying metric sink in for a moment. The oceans are absorbing energy equivalent to 5 Hiroshima nuclear bombs every single second. The sheer scale of that thermal absorption means that even when an El Niño technically ends, we are still dealing with a massive hangover effect of residual heat. The water just doesn't have time to cool down before the next cycle begins.
Which brings us right back to your wallet. Because all this atmospheric chaos is creating what economists are calling the global insurance cliff. Traditional risk models are just being completely overwhelmed by unpredictable, simultaneous global disasters. You literally can't model for a world where a massive flood in one hemisphere happens at the exact same time as a historic drought in the other. Reinsurance capital gets depleted rapidly, and as a result, standard policies start excluding coverages, and premiums just skyrocket across the board. Every business, every farm, every shipping company is paying more to insure themselves against this chaos. And those costs, yep, you guessed it, they're passed directly down the line, baked right into the price of every single thing you buy.
So, the next time you went to the total on your grocery receipt, I want you to remember the invisible engine. It's not just standard inflation anymore. The old normal, where weather patterns were somewhat predictable and supply chains were stable, has been entirely deleted by a warming Pacific Ocean. The real question you have to ask yourself as we face down this era of permanent climate inflation isn't just why things cost so much today. It's, can you afford the new normal tomorrow?